I'm with Addy Clinton from October7.org. Addy, what is October7.org?
October7.org, it is a website compiling firsthand accounts of survivors of the massacre of October 7th in Israel. Basically, stories that are divided into different segments. We have survivors from the Nova Festival, we have survivors from the surrounding communities surrounding Gaza, and we have accounts from fighters from the different security forces, IDF, etc.
Did you set up this website and why did you want to set up this website about the massacre?
We did. It was my brother and I. The morning of October 9th, I think I read one of the first testimonies on Facebook of a survivor from the Nova Party. And I
Mm.
told my brother that I'm shocked and it just makes no sense that Hebrew speakers alone will be exposed to these stories. And I really wanted to share. I have a lot of friends. I used to live in the US and work there, and I have many English speaking friends around the world. And I kind of wanted to shout out what was happening in Israel. And I think the idea of a website was I didn't want to do anything like social media focused. I really wanted it to be a serious website that could stay for ages and people can read it on the computer. And it just seemed more legit to me. So that's how it initiated.
Is it important to document what happened on October the 7th?
Most definitely. I think we didn't know that at the time, but our government and the different municipalities, and I think we failed to document and showcase to the world exactly what happened during those times. And I hope this will be the website will stand for ages. You know, we have Holocaust stories from a century ago, and October 7th would be relevant forever. And I hope it'll be a good source of information for generations to come.
Mm. Whose stories do you have there? What kind of stories are they?
So initially, it was a lot of stories from survivors of the Nova Festival. These are younger people who share on because we compile the stories from social media. We found the stories, the testimonies, and we contacted the survivors asking their permission to translate their account into English and to put it on the website. Later on, it was translated to different languages as well. So initially it was a lot of accounts from the Nova Party, people describing how they were hiding and where they escaped and where they were walking and just horrific descriptions. Someone who got shot, someone whose friends died in front of her eyes, different stories from the festival. And later on, we started collecting stories from the Gaza surrounding municipalities, people who were hiding in their safe room, people who were looking outside the window and saw terrorists and were forced to get out of the house. We even have an account of someone who was taken hostage by the terrorists in Kibbutz Be'eri and then later on released. There was another account that was very famous, a famous story because there was a survivor that was taken hostage in a house full of hostages, and then one of the terrorists agreed to come out and surrender to the police and took her as, I guess, shield, and she was taken out of the house and was moved to the IDF forces. And later on, I'm not sure what has happened, but the house was fired by our forces, and all the hostages were killed. So she and one other woman were the only survivors, and we have her account on the website. So different stories from different directions, but I think all describing the horrors of that day. I think every account would put you in that state of mind. I would hope so.
Israel's a small country, so does everybody sort of know someone who was affected by this?
You know, it seems like it is a small country, and so many people were affected, even if not from the events on October 7th. Like, if you don't know someone who was killed or wounded or taken hostage, then you know someone who was evacuated from their home or someone who was seeking shelter in your city. So it kind of affected everyone.
I imagine these are very difficult to read, but they need to be read.
It is, I've heard from people saying, I could only go through one account. I couldn't take more, and it's completely understood, but it's out there and it's you can always get back and read more and hopefully this will be a source of information for either future. I know there's lawsuits taking place in Hague with testimonies of survivors. These are video testimonies, and I think this information should be out there for the sake of history.
Are you looking for more stories to add to the website?
I can't say we're actively looking anymore. I think the sharing of the survivors has subsided. It was in the first few weeks and few months that people were like shouting out their stories, and we had a really big group of volunteers collecting them and approaching the survivors. And then later on, we cooperated with a photographer that started documenting these stories on video. And he asked for our assistance with translation. And we took the video testimonies and transcribed them into written testimonies. So I think a lot of the stories from the Gaza surrounding villages, also older people, they haven't, maybe haven't even processed what has been through and what has happened to them, but they're slowly coming out. And I think the ones we've compiled in the past few months were mostly accounts and testimonies that were published on different media websites, but we haven't
The focus
contacted
seems
any.
the focus seems to have gone to Gaza now. Do you think people have forgotten about October the 7th?
I'm afraid the world community has shifted their focus, and a lot is going towards Gaza. And in Israel, a lot of the focus is towards the hostages and a future deal, which makes complete sense. And yeah, in a way, these stories are not spoken, they're not on the public eye. It's something that's in the past. Yeah, that Black Saturday, yeah, on October 7th, but as if there's been a time that there's always a survivor on the evening news or in the morning news and the stories kept popping, it's definitely not the case now. And people are more focused about the war, about the public opinion, about the world opinion, and yeah, and hopefully the return of the hostages.
How did you get to hear about what was happening on October the 7th?
Like a lot of people in Israel, I was in my home in Tel Aviv. I do not have a safe room in the house. There is a shelter, but we just go into the staircase of our building. I have two small children. So, the sirens kind of took us by surprise. We thought it was probably a mistake. And we actually had the privilege of not turning on the TV as we had small children and we didn't want to expose them to that information. So we consumed all our information online on our phones, and the atrocities just kept coming through. And you try to keep a poker face for the family, but you realize what has happened. And my brother joined us. He lives alone in Tel Aviv, and he wanted to be around family, so he came to be with us. And the next day, he found out that a good friend of his from Kfar Aza has lost her family. Her parents and her
Oh,
sibling were murdered, and it was a big thing to process. It was an ongoing thing, and I think if you don't want to sit in front of the news and consume it constantly and take a break, it was very difficult. But we had the privilege to do so and only consume it on our cell phones behind or, without the kids noticing. So
when did you know you needed to do something and collect these stories?
it was an urge that I felt a couple of days after. And I spoke to Raz, my brother, and on the morning of October 9th, I purchased a domain. I remember talking to him from my bedroom before even getting out of bed, asking him which domain would sound better. And let's get it first and then think about what to do. And once that was purchased, he compiled a group of volunteers, people who work with him, who have worked with him, and different engineers and social media people. And we started talking about forming the website and then collecting volunteers, putting the word out there on social media that we're looking for people to help us, for volunteers to translate the testimonies, volunteers to help track them. So it was very early on, and I think within less than a week, the website was already up and standing in its first appearance with about 20 different testimonies.
Oh, you were very quick.
Yeah.
We've seen with the Holocaust denial. Are these stories to counter denial?
It's something that has crossed our minds because I remind you, the website was live a week after the events, and it was kind of before the world's opinion has shifted against Israel. And I think it was even before we started with our military forces in Gaza. But I think that was the idea because we never wanted to go. We were like, we're not a news website. We thought in the beginning, oh, maybe we'll put a countdown of how many rockets were fired and how many people were killed. And we're like, no, you can find that information on Ynet News or whatever. We're not a news website. We just want to bring the authentic stories by, firsthand accounts, make it as reliable as possible. Every person has a name. Every person has, a picture, their own picture, and it's just their own story. And it made it seem a lot more genuine and authentic. And hopefully it will be able to combat future denials. And, there's always going to be denial out there. We've seen it with the New York Times report about the sexual violence. We see it everywhere. We can't counteract everything, but the idea was to make it as authentic as possible.
Has it shocked you, the denial?
Um, I don't know if it's shocking, but it's not surprising. Maybe I'm more shocked that we're not getting more people to speak in our behalf. If it's celebrities or public opinion movers that have not spoken about the events. And I feel like that bothers me more because fanatics and people who will deny what happened, it's always out there. And I don't feel like it's taken at the same level or, I feel like they don't have that much of an impact, but people who don't speak and don't voice their opinion and just ignore, it kind of bothers me more.
What is your hope for these stories?
First of all, it's a website that was created and run by volunteers, including myself. Most of our volunteers have moved on to their daily works, their daily lives. So it's not operated daily. We have a couple testimonies waiting to be translated, and it's been a couple weeks, but I don't nag anyone. Everybody has their own lives. I hope that the website will shift into a more I don't know how to say it, but like different hands that have maybe more structure and more of the abilities to keep it running, either the public library, the Jerusalem Public Library, or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, or something that's a little bit more official and that they can take care of it for the ongoing years because I don't want it to, disappear and like lose focus. And I feel like it needs to be run by some official
Mm.
force. Or...
And what's the website for people who'd like to know more? And what's your Facebook page?
So it's october7.org. We do have a Facebook page. We also have an Instagram account. I think they're both linked on the website. It's Testimonies of October 7th on Instagram. And there we have some quotes from the stories, and also we've had actors read out some of the testimonies. And we had viral videos that were shared with Stand With Us and with other Instagram accounts just to try and, like bring those stories to life and make more people go and read them. So we figured we do need some kind of social presence, and that was established after the website was formed.
Well, Adi, thank you very much for sharing today.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for the opportunity.